5-year-old boy whispers to George Strait in parking lot. He turns pale and urgently calls 911. The late afternoon Texas sun cast long shadows across the asphalt of the shopping center parking lot. George Strait adjusted his white Stetson hat, squinting slightly as he walked toward his truck. The day had been ordinary enough. A quick meeting with his manager about an upcoming benefit concert, followed by a stop at his favorite Western wear store to pick up a custom-ordered belt buckle. Nothing that would suggest his life was about to change forever. At 59 years old, George had seen it all. 4 decades in the spotlight had earned him the undisputed title of King of Country Music, with more #1 hits than any artist in any genre. He'd played for presidents and sold out arenas that held 70,000 fans. Fame had long since ceased to surprise him. He'd mastered the art of being a legend while maintaining his privacy, his dignity, and his trademark humility. He clicked his truck remote, hearing the familiar beep of the doors unlocking. That's when he felt it, a strange sensation at the back of his neck, like he was being watched. George turned slowly, his instincts from a lifetime in the public, eye kicking in. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the normal comings and goings of shoppers, the early evening crowd, thin but steady. Then he lowered his gaze. A small figure stood about 15 feet away, partially hidden behind a parked car. A boy, no more than 5 years old, with sandy brown hair that needed cutting and clothes that had seen better days. What struck George most weren't the clothes, though, or even the fact that the child appeared to be alone. It was the boy's eyes, wide, desperate, and filled with a fear no child should know. George hesitated. Where were this child's parents? He looked around again, searching for an adult who might be frantically looking for their son. The parking lot remained stubbornly ordinary, no panicked parents in sight. "Hey there, little buddy," George said, keeping his voice gentle as he crouched down to the boy's eye level. "Are you lost? Where's your mama or daddy?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he took 2 tentative steps forward, then stopped, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. He seemed to be gathering courage, fighting against some internal warning to run away. "It's okay," George assured him. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you lost? I can help you find your folks." Finally, the boy moved, coming closer with the cautious steps of a wild animal approaching an outstretched hand. When he was close enough, George could see tear tracks on his dirt-smudged face. The king of country music felt something twist in his chest. He'd raised a son of his own, knew the fierce protectiveness that came with parenthood. Where in God's name were this child's parents? "What's your name, son?" George tried again. The boy glanced nervously over his shoulder, then back at George. Whatever he was about to do clearly terrified him, but something even stronger than fear was driving him forward. "John," the boy whispered so softly George almost didn't hear it. "Nice to meet you, John. I'm George. Can you tell me where your mama is?" Instead of answering, John took one final step forward. He gestured for George to lean closer, like he had a secret to share. Instinctively, George bent down further, turning his ear toward the child. What John whispered next stopped George Strait's heart cold. 7 words, 7 terrible words that no child should ever have to say, 7 words that would haunt George for the rest of his life. "The bad man is going to kill Mommy." George pulled back sharply, searching the boy's face for any sign that this was some kind of game or misunderstanding. There was none, only raw, undiluted terror. "What did you say?" George asked, his voice barely audible, hoping desperately he'd misheard. John's lower lip trembled. "The bad man said if she tells, he'll kill her, and then me too." His voice broke. On the last word, a small sob escaping. George felt the blood drain from his face. He'd heard plenty of dark lyrics in country songs, had even recorded a few murder ballads in his time, but this wasn't a song. This was real life, a real child. standing before him, speaking of murder as if it were inevitable. His hand moved to his pocket almost without conscious thought, pulling out his cell phone. "John, does your mama know you're here? Does she know you're talking to me?" The boy shook his head violently. "She's hiding. She told me to stay put. But I saw you. I know you from the TV at the laundry place. You sing songs. People listen to you." The simple logic of a child. Find someone important. Find someone people listen to. Find someone who can help. George's fingers were already dialing. 911, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Was this boy making up a story? He didn't think so. The fear was too raw, too real. Was he misinterpreting something he'd overheard? Possibly, but George couldn't take that chance. 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "My name is George Strait," he said, never taking his eyes off John. "I'm at the Westlake Shopping Center on Bee Caves Road. There's a young boy here, maybe 5 years old, who says someone is threatening to kill his mother." He watched John's eyes widen at hearing his secret spoken aloud, as if the words themselves might summon the danger. "Sir, is the child with you now?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes, he's right here. His name is John. He approached me in the parking lot." "And where is the mother?" "I don't know. John says she's hiding." George lowered, his voice slightly. "Ma'am, I don't know if this is real or not, but this boy is terrified, genuinely terrified." "Understood, Mr. Strait. We're dispatching officers to your location now. Please stay with the child if it's safe to do so. Can you describe what he's wearing?" George quickly described John's faded blue t-shirt and jeans, his worn sneakers. "Sir, if possible, try to find out more about his mother and their situation while you wait. Officers should be there within 5 minutes." 5 minutes. George looked at the small, frightened boy before him and wondered what horrors those 5 minutes might hold. "John," he said gently after ending the call, "can you tell me your mama's name and where you live?" The boy shook his head again, his eyes darting around the parking lot. "She said not to tell. He might hear." "Who might hear, John? Who is the bad man?" But John had gone silent, his momentary bravery seemingly exhausted. He stood there, small and vulnerable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. George made a quick decision. "Let's sit in my truck while we wait, okay? It's safer there." To his surprise, John nodded and followed him to the vehicle. George opened the passenger door and helped the boy climb up, then walked around to the driver's side. He didn't start the engine. He had no intention of leaving this spot until the police arrived, but the enclosed space felt safer, more private. Hey there, friends. I hope you're enjoying this story so far. If you are, please hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss any of our emotional stories. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so leave a comment below telling me your city or country. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us bring more stories like this one right to your screen. Now, let's get back to finding out what happens next with little John and George Strait. "John," George tried again, his voice calm, despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Can you tell me anything about where your mama is hiding?" The boy looked down at his hands. "In the back of the store, with the boxes." "Which store, John? Which store are the boxes in?" "The one with the washing machines." "A laundromat." George's mind raced. There was indeed a laundromat at this shopping center, tucked between a nail salon and a taco restaurant. "And the bad man? Where is he?" John's face crumpled. "Looking for us. He found where we were staying. Mommy saw his car and grabbed me. We ran." George fought to keep his expression neutral, to not show the growing horror he felt. "John, is the bad man your daddy?" A violent headshake. "No, my daddy died when I was a baby. The bad man is Mommy's boss." A new layer of complexity, a workplace situation gone terribly wrong perhaps. Before George could ask anything else, red and blue lights flashed across the windshield. Two police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, officers emerging with purposeful strides. George opened his door. "The police are here to help, John. They're good people who will keep you and your mama safe." The boy's eyes went wide with panic. "Mommy says police don't believe people like us." The words hit George like a physical blow. People like us. How many times had this small family reached out for help only to be dismissed or ignored? What kind of life had they been living that John's mother believed even the police wouldn't protect them? "These ones will," George said firmly. "I promise you that." He stepped out of the truck and waved to the approaching officers, keeping his movements slow and visible. "Over here," he called. The first officer to reach him was a woman in her 30s, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Strait, I'm Officer Barrera. Where's the child?" George gestured to the truck. "His name is John. He's scared to death, says someone is threatening to kill his mother. She's apparently hiding in the laundromat here in the shopping center." Officer Barrera nodded, then spoke into her radio, dispatching her partner to check the laundromat while she dealt with the boy. She approached the passenger side of George's truck carefully, crouching down just as George had done earlier. George watched as she spoke quietly to John, her manner gentle but firm. The boy seemed to respond to her, nodding occasionally. After a few minutes, Officer Barrera straightened and returned to George. "He says his last name is Parker. His mother is Eva Parker. They've been staying at the Southwind Motel for the past week, paid cash. Before that they were in Houston, but they left suddenly. The man they're running from is someone named Mitchell Kane. According to John, this Kane is his mother's former employer at a cleaning service." George absorbed the information, trying to piece together the story. "Did he say why this man is after them?" Officer Barrera's expression darkened slightly. "He says his mother saw something bad while cleaning a house, something she wasn't supposed to see. The boy doesn't know what exactly, but whatever it was, Kane threatened to kill her if she told anyone. A classic case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time then. Eva Parker, a cleaning woman, stumbling across something. Drugs, stolen goods, something worse. And now running for her. Life with her young son in tow. "Officer," George said quietly, "that boy and his mother need protection." "We'll do everything we can, Mr. Strait. My partner is checking the laundromat now." Her radio crackled, and she turned slightly away to listen to the incoming message. George could see the change in her posture immediately. Something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked, as soon as she lowered the radio. "My partner found a woman matching Eva Parker's description. She's unconscious in a storage room at the back of the laundromat. The ambulance is on its way." George felt his breath catch. "Is she alive?" "Yes, but badly beaten. It looks like someone found her before John found you." George looked back at the truck, at the small boy who sat waiting, unaware that his worst fears were being realized. A wave of protective fury washed over him, so strong it nearly took his breath away. Officer Barrera must have read something in his expression. "Mr. Strait, I know this is upsetting, but please let us handle it. The best thing you can do for that boy right now is stay with him until we sort this out." George nodded, fighting to regain his composure. "Of course. Whatever he needs." As the officer turned to coordinate with the newly arriving emergency medical technicians, George walked back to his truck and climbed in beside John. "Is my mommy okay?" the boy asked immediately, his voice small but direct. George chose his words carefully. "The police found her, John. She's hurt, but doctors are going to take care of her." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes. "It was the bad man, wasn't it? He found her." George couldn't lie to him. "It looks that way. But your mommy is strong, and the police are looking for him now. He won't hurt either of you again." John looked down at his hands again, his small shoulders beginning to shake with silent sobs. Without thinking, George reached over and pulled the boy into a gentle hug. John stiffened momentarily, then collapsed against him, crying in earnest now. "I was supposed to stay hidden," he sobbed. "Mommy told me to stay behind the big washing machine until she came back, but I got scared when she didn't come back." "You did the right thing coming to find help," George assured him, his heart breaking for this child who had been carrying such an impossible burden. "You're very brave, John. Very brave indeed." Over the boy's head, George could see more police cars arriving, the parking lot now awash in emergency lights. Officer Barrera was coordinating what looked like a search of the entire shopping center. The ambulance had backed up to the laundromat entrance. The hunt for Mitchell Kane had begun. And George Strait, who had never considered himself anything more than a singer of songs, found himself in the middle of a nightmare that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with the trembling child in his arms. What he didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was just how far the ripples from this chance encounter would spread, or how many lives would change because a desperate little boy recognized a famous face and took a chance. The next few hours passed in a blur of police, statements, hushed conversations, and the steady beep of hospital monitors. George sat in an uncomfortable chair in the pediatric waiting area of St. David's Medical Center, watching John sleep fitfully on a small couch across from him. The boy had finally succumbed to exhaustion after refusing to leave George's side throughout the entire ordeal. Officer Barrera had arranged for a child welfare worker to come, but upon arriving and seeing how tightly John clung to George, she'd agreed to a temporary arrangement. John would stay with George until his mother's condition stabilized or other. Family could be located. The country star had called his wife Norma immediately, explaining the situation in a voice tight with emotion. Without hesitation, she told him to do whatever was needed to help the child. Eva Parker had been rushed into surgery upon arrival at the hospital. The preliminary report from the doctors was grim. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion. Whoever had attacked her had been methodical, brutal. She was still unconscious, her condition listed as critical but stable. George rubbed his tired eyes, trying to process everything that had happened since that moment. In the parking lot, the police had launched a manhunt for Mitchell Kane, but so far he'd managed to elude them. What they had discovered, however, was deeply troubling. Mitchell Kane owned Superior Cleaning Services, a company that specialized in high-end residential properties throughout Austin and the surrounding hill country. Eva Parker had worked for him for just over 8 months, according to employment records. 2 weeks ago, she'd failed to show up for her assigned cleaning jobs and had not been seen at the modest apartment she rented until today. When police searched the Southwind motel room where Eva and John had been staying, they found a room paid up for 2 weeks, but nearly empty of personal belongings. Everything Eva and John owned apparently fit into a single duffel bag, which had been found at the laundromat. The only other item of note was a burner phone hidden under the mattress, with just one number programmed into it, the office of the Austin District Attorney. George was still contemplating this revelation when Officer Barrera returned, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to George, then sat beside him, her expression serious. "Any change with the boy's mother?" she asked quietly. George shook his head. "Still in recovery. They said it could be hours before she wakes up, if she does at all." He couldn't keep the edge of anger from his voice. Officer Barrera nodded. Grimly, "We've got some new information about Mitchell Kane you should know about, especially if you're going to be looking after John for now." George straightened, fully alert despite his exhaustion. "What is it?" "Kane isn't just a cleaning service owner. Based on financial records we've pulled, that business appears to be primarily a front. His real income comes from somewhere else, though we haven't pinned that down yet. What we do know is that he has connections, serious ones. 2 of our officers went to his home address to question him, and they were met by an attorney who already had a statement prepared, claiming Kane was out of state on business and knew nothing about any assault. That was fast, George observed. Too fast, Officer Barrera agreed. The kind of fast that comes with serious money and influence. The attorney is from Vilmer and Hatch, one of the most expensive firms in Texas. George took a sip of his coffee, processing this. So what was Eva Parker running from? What did she see? We don't know for certain yet, but given the burner phone with the DA's number and Kane's apparent resources, we have a working theory. Eva was likely cleaning a home where she saw something incriminating, something significant enough that Kane would rather kill her than risk her talking. Drugs, George suggested. Officer Barrera shrugged slightly. Possibly, or financial records, evidence of other crimes. Austin has its share of wealthy criminals. The real question is why she didn't just go straight to the police or the DA when she first discovered whatever it was. George looked over at John's sleeping form. He said his mother believed the police wouldn't help people like them. A shadow crossed the officer's face. That's not uncommon, unfortunately. People in vulnerable positions, single mothers, immigrants, the working poor, they often don't trust authority figures. Too many bad experiences. She paused. And sometimes they're right to be wary. Not all cops are good cops. The frank admission surprised George. But you're trying to help them now. Yes, we are, though I'll be honest with you, Mr. Strait. Without your involvement, I'm not sure this case would be getting the attention it is. A cleaning lady attacked behind a laundromat. It might have been written off as a robbery or domestic violence. But when George Strait calls 911 about a death threat, people notice. The implication hung in the air between them. Eva Parker and her son had been invisible until George Strait saw them. How many others remained unseen? Officer Barrera's radio crackled, and she excused herself to take the call in the hallway. George watched through the glass partition as her expression changed from professional attention to obvious concern. When she returned, her face was grim. "There's been a development," she said. Mitchell Kane just walked into the Austin Police headquarters with his attorney and the chief of detectives, who happens to be a personal friend of his. He's filed a complaint against Eva Parker for theft of property valued at over $10,000. George felt his jaw tighten. That's absurd. She and her son have nothing. He claims she stole a client's property while cleaning their home. A diamond bracelet. He's pressing charges and demanding her current location. Is that even legal for him to demand that? George asked incredulously. Technically, as her employer reporting alleged employee theft, he can request to be kept informed of the investigation. What's unusual is how quickly he's gotten the chief involved. Officer Barrera's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. Something's not right here, Mr. Strait. Kane is pulling strings, and they're connected to some powerful people. George looked again at John, still mercifully asleep. What does this mean for Eva and John's safety? It means we need to be extremely careful. I've stationed an officer outside Eva's hospital room, but if Kane has influence within the department, she let the implication hang. George felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. What can I do? Officer Barrera seemed to wrestle with herself before answering. Officially, nothing beyond what you're already doing, giving John a safe place. Until we sort this out. She hesitated, then added, unofficially. Your name carries weight, Mr. Strait. If you wanted to make some calls, ensure this case stays in the spotlight. George nodded slowly, understanding perfectly. Fame was often a burden, but occasionally it could be leveraged for good. Consider it done. Before they could discuss further, a doctor in surgical scrubs appeared in the doorway. Are you the people here for Eva Parker? She asked, her voice low with professional compassion. George and Officer Barrera both stood. "Yes," George answered. "How is she?" "Stabilized for now. She's still unconscious, but her vital signs are improving. The next 24 hours will be critical." The doctor glanced at John. "Is that her, son?" "Yes," Officer Barrera confirmed. "We thought it best not to wake him until we had news." The doctor nodded approvingly. "Good call." When she was brought in, Miss Parker had a moment of consciousness in the ambulance. She was extremely agitated, asking for her son. The EMT assured her he was safe, which seemed to calm her enough for treatment. "Did she say anything about who attacked her?" Officer Barrera asked. The doctor shook her head. "Nothing specific, but she did keep repeating one phrase, the flash drive, over and over until the pain medication took effect." George and Officer Barrera exchanged glances. A flash drive, digital evidence of whatever Eva had witnessed or discovered. "We didn't find any flash drive at the motel or the laundromat," Officer Barrera said. "Maybe she hid it somewhere else," George suggested. "Or someone took it during the attack." The conversation was interrupted by a small voice. "Mommy hid it in my shoe." All three adults turned to see John sitting up on the couch, his eyes wide and solemn. He held up his left foot, pointing to the worn sneaker. "She put it in here and told me never to take my shoes off, not even to sleep." Officer Barrera moved quickly to the boy's side, kneeling before him. "John, are you saying your mother hid a flash drive in your shoe?" He nodded solemnly. "She said it was our ticket to safety if anything happened to her. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone unless she didn't come back." His lower lip trembled. "Is Mommy not coming back?" "Your mommy is here in the hospital," George said quickly, moving to sit beside John. "She's hurt, but the doctors are taking good care of her. She's going to need to rest for a while." John seemed to consider this, then carefully removed his left shoe. He turned it over and picked at the insole until it came loose, revealing a small hiding place beneath. Tucked inside was a black USB drive, no larger than a stick of gum. Officer Barrera took it carefully, holding it up to the light. "John, did your mother tell you what's on this?" The boy shook his head. "Just that it was important, and that the bad man wanted it really bad." The officer looked at George, then at the doctor, who had witnessed the entire exchange. "Doctor, I need to secure this immediately. Can you stay with Mr. Strait and John while I make a call?" The doctor nodded, and Officer Barrera stepped out into the hall, the flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. George watched through the glass as she made a call, her body language tense and urgent. John tugged at George's sleeve. "Mr. George, is my mommy going to die?" The raw fear in the child's voice cut through George like a knife. "No, buddy. She's tough, your mommy. The doctor just told us she's getting better." "Can I see her?" George looked to the doctor, who had moved closer. "Not quite yet," she said gently. "Your mom needs to sleep right now to help her body heal, but maybe tomorrow, if she's feeling stronger." John seemed to accept this, but his small face remained troubled. "What about the bad man? Is he going to find us here?" Before George could answer, Officer Barrera returned, her expression carefully neutral, but a new tension evident in her shoulders. "I've secured the flash drive with evidence," she said, "and I've contacted a detective I trust completely to review its contents." She looked directly at George. "Mr. Strait, I need to speak with you privately for a moment." George nodded, then turned to John. "I'll be right back, buddy. The doctor's going to stay with you, okay?" Once they were in the hallway, Officer Barrera's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "We've got a serious problem. While I was on the phone, I received an alert. The chief has personally ordered Eva Parker to be transferred to police custody once she's medically stable, citing her as a flight risk in the theft investigation." "He can't do that," George protested. "She's the victim here." "Technically, he can. She's now a suspect in a felony theft case as well as a victim in an assault case, and with no witnesses to the assault other than her son. She trailed off. This is insane. That little boy in there watched his mother get beaten nearly to death, and now the police are treating her like a criminal? Officer Barrera's voice dropped even lower. It gets worse. I just found out that Judge Raymond Willis has signed off on an emergency custody order for John, placing him temporarily with family services while his mother is under investigation. George felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. They're trying to separate them to get to the boy, Officer Barrera nodded grimly. That's my read too. They want to isolate both of them. Eva in police custody, John in the system, makes them easier to control or silence. A cold fury, unlike anything George had ever known, began to build inside him. When is this supposed to happen? The custody order for John takes effect immediately. The officer serving it could arrive any minute. As for Eva, the transfer order is contingent on doctors' approval of her condition, but could be as soon as tomorrow morning. George straightened to his full height, a quiet determination settling over him. Not going to happen. Officer Barrera looked at him sharply. Mr. Strait, I understand your concern, but interfering with a court order? I'm not interfering with anything, George cut in, his voice calm but resolute. I'm simply going to make some calls, like you suggested, starting with my attorney, then a few friends in the media, and maybe the governor's office. I've played at enough fundraisers to have a direct line. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the police officer bound by procedure versus the woman who clearly suspected corruption within her own department. What about John? She asked finally. They'll still try to take him into custody. George had already been thinking about this. My ranch is outside the Austin jurisdiction. If John's mother were to authorize me as his temporary guardian while she recovers, strictly following proper legal procedures, of course, would that not supersede a city custody order? A hint of admiration flickered in Officer Barrera's eyes. It might, especially with the right judge signing off on it. But you'd need Eva conscious and legally competent to authorize that. As if on cue, the doctor emerged from the waiting room. Excuse me, but I thought you should know. Ms. Parker is showing signs of regaining consciousness. If you'd like to, be there when she wakes up. Now would be the time. George and Officer Barrera exchanged a look of shared purpose. What about John? George asked. He's asking for his mother, the doctor replied. Normally we don't allow children in recovery, but given the circumstances, let me talk to him first, George said. Explain the situation. As he walked back into the waiting room, George Strait, a man who had faced packed stadiums without flinching, felt the weight of what lay ahead. In the next few hours, he would need to help a traumatized child reunite with his injured mother, obtain legal guardianship to protect them both, and somehow stay one step ahead of whoever was pulling strings to silence them. And all because a little boy had recognized his face and whispered 7 terrible words that had changed everything. The recovery room was dimly lit, the steady rhythm of medical machinery creating a technological lullaby that seemed at odds with the human drama unfolding within its walls. Eva Parker lay still against white hospital sheets, her face a roadmap of bruises and lacerations. An oxygen tube ran beneath her nose, and IV lines snaked from both arms. Despite the damage, George could see that she had once been pretty, with the same sandy hair as her son, and delicate features now swollen beyond recognition. John stood frozen in the doorway, his small hand clutching George's with surprising strength. Officer Barrera waited just behind them, having convinced hospital security to allow all 3 visitors, despite protocol. "Mommy?" John's voice was barely audible, a fragile thread of sound in the sterile room. Ava's eyelids fluttered. A small moan escaped her lips. The doctor moved to her side, checking vitals. She's responding to stimuli. That's a good sign. Keep talking to her. George gently encouraged John forward. Go ahead, buddy. Let your mom hear your voice. John approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid his presence might somehow cause more harm. When he reached the edge, he stood on tiptoes, just tall enough to see over the rail. Mommy, it's me. John. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm sorry I didn't stay hidden, but I found help, Mommy. I found the man from the TV. Eva's fingers twitched on the blanket. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. As they found her son's face, recognition dawned, followed immediately by panic. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain. Easy, the doctor cautioned, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've got 3 broken ribs and a concussion. You need to stay still. John, Eva whispered, her voice raspy and weak. You're okay. He didn't... She couldn't finish the thought. I'm okay, Mommy. The bad man didn't find me. I saw Mr. George in the parking lot and told him what you said about the flash drive being our ticket. Eva's gaze shifted, noticing George and Officer Barrera for the first time. Confusion, then fear, flickered across her face. Mrs. Parker, I'm Officer Elena Barrera, the policewoman said, stepping forward. Your son found Mr. Strait here when you were attacked. He's been looking after John while we've been trying to piece together what happened. Eva's eyes darted between them, the wariness of a cornered animal evident in her expression. She tried to speak, coughed painfully, then tried again. You don't understand. He'll kill us both. He has people everywhere. Mitchell Kane, Officer Barrera confirmed. We know he's behind the attack. John showed us the flash drive you hid. In his shoe. A mixture of relief and renewed fear crossed Eva's battered face. You have it? It's safe? It's secure, Officer Barrera assured her. I've entrusted it to a detective I personally vouch for. He's reviewing the contents now, away from headquarters. Eva closed her eyes briefly, whether from pain or momentary respite from fear. George couldn't tell. When she opened them again, they fixed on him with surprising intensity. Why are you helping us? She asked directly. You don't know me. You don't know my son. Before George could answer, John piped up. He's a good man, Mommy, like in your songs, the ones about people helping strangers. Despite everything, a faint smile touched Eva's lips. You listen to country music? She asked George, a hint of irony in her weak voice. I've been known to, George replied with gentle humor. Mrs. Parker, your son is very brave. He recognized me and took a chance that I might help. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, she said firmly, grimacing as the effort cost her. Not anyone. Most people walk away, look the other way. She reached for John's hand with trembling fingers. What happens now? Officer Barrera stepped closer. Mrs. Parker, I need to be direct with you. Mitchell Kane has filed theft charges against you, claiming you stole a diamond bracelet from a client's home. He's convinced the chief of detectives to issue an order transferring you to police custody once you're medically stable. Eva's face drained of what little color it had. No, God, no, you can't let them take me. They'll kill me in custody, make it look like an accident or suicide. Her eyes filled with tears of desperation. And John, there's also an emergency custody. Order for John, Officer Barrera continued, her voice gentle but direct. To place him with family services while you're under investigation. A sound escaped Eva then, something between a sob and a moan of pure anguish. Please, she begged, looking from Officer Barrera to George. Please don't let them take my son. He's all I have. They'll hurt him to get to me. George moved closer to the bed. Mrs. Parker, Eva, we're not going to let that happen. But we need to act quickly and legally. Officer Barrera and I have a plan, but we need your consent. Eva's eyes locked with his, searching. What plan? If you authorize me as John's temporary guardian while you recover, it would supersede the city's custody order. My ranch is outside Austin jurisdiction. John would be safe there with my wife and me until this is resolved. Hope and suspicion warred in Eva's expression. Why would you do that? Take in a stranger's child, put yourself at risk. You don't know what these people are capable of. George considered his answer carefully. He could have spoken about duty, or Christian charity, or simply doing the right thing. All would have been true, but incomplete. Instead, he chose honesty. Because your son reminded me that fame isn't just about sold-out concerts and gold records. It's a platform, a kind of power, and I've spent too many years enjoying that power without using it where it really matters. He glanced at John, then back to Eva. Your son believed in me. Now I'm asking you to do the same. Eva studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do I need to sign? Officer Barrera produced a tablet. I've prepared an emergency guardianship document. It grants temporary custody to Mr. Strait while maintaining your parental rights. It just needs your electronic signature, and then we'll file it immediately with Judge Martinez in Williamson County. She's a fair judge, unlikely to be under Kane's influence. As Eva signed the document with a shaky finger, George turned to the doctor. How soon could Mrs. Parker be transferred to another facility, someplace outside Austin, perhaps? The doctor frowned. Medically speaking, she shouldn't be moved for at least 72 hours. But if there are security concerns... She hesitated. I could arrange a transfer to our sister facility in San Marcos by tomorrow evening, citing specialized care needs. Do it, George said firmly, then caught himself. If that's what Mrs. Parker wants, of course. Eva nodded emphatically, grimacing at the pain the movement caused. Anything to get away from here, away from him. Officer Barrera's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression darkening. Detective Ramirez just reviewed the flash drive. It contains financial records, detailed ledgers showing millions flowing through shell companies, all connected to elite properties cleaned by Kane's service. Properties owned by judges, city officials, and business leaders. She looked up, her eyes grave. It appears to be a sophisticated money laundering operation, with Kane as the middleman between Austin's elite and some very dangerous international players. That's what I found, Eva confirmed, her voice gaining strength as the pieces fell into place. I was cleaning Judge Willis's study. He's one of Kane's most important clients. I knocked over a stack of papers, and when I was picking them up, I saw these strange spreadsheets, names, properties, and huge dollar amounts. I wouldn't have thought anything of it except what? George prompted gently when she trailed off. Except I recognized one of the names, Manuel Suarez. He was in the news last year, a drug lord who was killed in a shootout in Mexico. She swallowed hard. His name was next to Judge Willis's vacation property in Lake Travis, $5 million. Officer Barrera was typing rapidly into her phone. Ramirez says there's more. Photos you took of the actual documents stored on the drive. Eva nodded weakly. I went back the next day with my phone, pretended I'd left my cleaning supplies, took pictures of everything I could find. The flash drive has copies. She looked directly at Officer Barrera. I tried to do the right thing. I called the district attorney's office, but they transferred me around, put me on hold. Nobody took me seriously. A cleaning lady accusing a federal judge? Then Kane called me that night, said he knew what I'd done, said I'd be dead before I could tell anyone else. Her voice broke. We've been running ever since. The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a physical weight. This wasn't just about a stolen bracelet or an isolated assault. It was about power, corruption, and a criminal network that reached into the highest levels of Austin's society. George's phone chimed with an incoming message. He checked it, then looked up with renewed determination. My attorney has filed the guardianship papers with Judge Martinez. She's reviewing them now." He turned to John, who had been listening to everything with the solemn attention of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. "John, how would you like to come stay at my ranch for a little while? We've got horses you can help feed and lots of open space to run around." John looked to his mother, seeking permission. Eva managed a weak smile. "It sounds wonderful, baby, like a little vacation while Mommy gets better." Before John could respond, a commotion in the hallway drew everyone's attention. Raised voices, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the unmistakable sound of authority being exercised. Officer Barrera moved swiftly to the door, peering out. "It's Sergeant Miller from Family Services, with 2 uniformed officers. They're here for John." George felt the boy press against his leg, trembling. He placed a protective hand on John's shoulder. "How much time do we need for the judge to approve the guardianship?" "Minutes, maybe an hour," Officer Barrera replied, tensely. "But they're here now." Eva struggled to sit up, panic giving her strength. "Please, don't let them take him." The doctor stepped forward suddenly. "I can buy you some time. Medical procedures take precedence over police business in my ward." She looked at Eva. "Mrs. Parker, I believe you're experiencing concerning neurological symptoms that require immediate diagnostic testing, the kind that requires a mother's consent and presence for a minor child." Understanding dawned in Eva's eyes. Yes, I am. Very concerning symptoms." The doctor nodded briskly and moved to the door, her authority as a physician a tangible force. George heard her speaking firmly to the officers, invoking medical protocols and patient rights. Officer Barrera slipped out to join the conversation, adding her own authority to the delay tactics. In the momentary reprieve, George knelt beside John. "It's going to be okay, buddy. These are just grown-up problems that grown-ups are going to solve. Your job is to stay with your mom and be brave, just like you've been all along." John nodded solemnly, his eyes too old for his young face. "Are the police going to take me away?" "No," George said firmly, "not if I have anything to say about it. And you know what? I've got a pretty loud voice when I need to use it." He winked, drawing a small smile from the boy. His phone rang. His attorney. George answered, listening intently, relief washing over him as he heard the news. "Thank you, Tom. Yes, immediately." He ended the call and looked up to see Officer Barrera returning. "Judge Martinez has approved the emergency guardianship," he told her. "It's official. John stays with me until his mother is recovered and safe." Officer Barrera's professional mask slipped just enough to reveal a satisfied smile. "I'll inform Sergeant Miller." She hesitated, then added, "There's still the matter of the transfer order for Mrs. Parker." The doctor, who had returned, behind Officer Barrera, spoke up. "As I was just explaining to the officers, Mrs. Parker's injuries require specialized care that can only be provided at our sister facility in San Marcos. I've already initiated the transfer paperwork. Medical necessity trumps police procedure." She gave them a pointed look, "especially when a patient's safety is at risk." George felt a wave of gratitude for these 2 women, a doctor and a police officer, using their positions to protect the vulnerable rather than serve the powerful. It reminded him of something his father had told him long ago. "Real power isn't about what you can take, son. It's about what you can protect." Eva reached for George's hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakened state. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing us, for helping us." "We're not out of the woods yet," George cautioned. "Kane and his connections will keep coming, but we've bought some time and protection." He looked at John, who was watching the adults with wary hope, and sometimes that's enough to change the whole game. What George Strait didn't say, what he couldn't say in front of the child whose trust he'd earned, was that the game had indeed changed, but in ways none of them yet fully understood. By taking in John Parker, by standing against the corruption Eva had uncovered, he had placed himself squarely in the crosshairs of powerful, dangerous men. The king of country music, who had built a career on songs about love and loss, honky-tonks and heartbreak, now found himself in a real-life ballad far darker than any he'd ever sung. And the next verse was about to begin. The sky above George, Strait's 1,200-acre ranch, was painted in broad strokes of gold and crimson as the Texas sun began its descent beyond the distant hills. 3 days had passed since the dramatic events at the hospital, days filled with legal maneuvers, security arrangements, and the careful transportation of Eva Parker to the San Marcos Medical Center, where she continued her slow recovery under an assumed name and the watchful eyes of private security. George stood on the broad porch of his limestone ranch house, watching John tentatively approach one of the gentler horses in the nearby paddock. The boy had been quiet since their arrival, speaking only when spoken to, his eyes constantly scanning, his surroundings as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. But now, under the patient guidance of Jennings, George's longtime ranch manager John was slowly extending a small hand toward the velvety nose of a chestnut quarter horse, named Daisy. "He's doing better today," Norma Strait said softly, coming to stand beside her husband. In their 49 years of marriage, she had seen George through everything from the devastating loss of their daughter to the dizzying heights of superstardom. Nothing seemed to rattle her calm center, not even, apparently, the sudden addition of a traumatized 5-year-old and a brewing criminal conspiracy to their usually peaceful life. "Baby steps," George agreed, watching as John's face lit up when the horse gently nuzzled his palm, seeking the apple slice Jennings had given him. "The nightmares are still pretty bad." Norma nodded. "He called out for his mother 3 times last night. I sat with him until he went back to sleep." She reached for George's hand, squeezing it gently. "You did the right thing bringing him here." George returned the pressure, grateful beyond words for her unwavering support. "Didn't really have a choice, Norm. Not after what that little boy went through to find help." "There's always a choice," she countered mildly. "Most people in your position would have called the authorities and walked away. Famous Good Samaritan. End of story." Before George could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced an approaching vehicle. Both Straits turned to see a black SUV making its way up the long drive, dust billowing behind it. George felt his body tense, conditioned by the events of the past few days, to expect threat rather than visitor. "That'll be Detective Ramirez," he said, recognizing the vehicle as it drew closer. "He called earlier, said he had updates on the case." Norma's expression grew serious. "I'll take John inside, get him settled with some dinner and that dinosaur documentary he likes." George nodded gratefully, watching as his wife made her way to the paddock with the natural grace that had first caught his eye at a high school dance all those decades ago. He marveled again at her ability to adapt, to simply fold new challenges into the fabric of their life without complaint. When he'd called her from the hospital to explain the situation, she hadn't questioned his decision to bring John home. "Of course we'll take him," she'd said, as if temporary guardianship of a child targeted by criminals was the most natural thing in the world. By the time Detective Marcus Ramirez parked and stepped out of his vehicle, Norma had successfully diverted John into the house, the boy's hand trustingly in hers. George walked down the porch steps to greet the detective, noting the shadows of exhaustion under the man's eyes and the slight rumpling of what had likely been a crisp shirt days earlier. "Appreciate you coming all the way out here," George said, extending his hand. Ramirez shook it firmly. "Appreciate you taking an interest in this case, Mr. Strait. Not every day a country music legend gets involved in one of my investigations. Despite the lightness of his words, his expression remained serious. "How's the boy doing?" George glanced toward the house. "As well as can be expected. He's safe here, at least. We've upgraded security, limited access to the property." He didn't mention the 3 retired Texas Rangers now employed as round-the-clock protection, or the state-of-the-art surveillance system hastily installed by a security firm that usually served foreign dignitaries. And his mother? Holding her own. The doctors in San Marcos say she's showing improvement every day, though the psychological trauma might take longer to heal than the physical injuries. George gestured toward the house. "Let's talk inside. My wife's made enough coffee to fuel an army." Once settled in George's wood-paneled study with steaming mugs before them, Ramirez opened his briefcase and removed a tablet. "I wanted to update you personally on what we've found and what we're up against." He tapped the screen, bringing up a series of documents. Everything on Eva Parker's flash drive has been authenticated. What she stumbled upon is the financial backbone of one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations we've seen in Central Texas. George leaned forward. "And Mitchell Kane is what? The banker?" "More like the concierge," Ramirez corrected. "Kane's cleaning business gives him legitimate access to the homes of Austin's elite, judges, politicians, business leaders. He uses this access to facilitate and monitor the laundering of cartel money through real estate investments, art purchases, and various business ventures." He swiped to a new document. "These people aren't just clients, they're partners. They provide the respectable front. Kane provides the connections to the cartels, and everyone gets rich." "And no one suspected?" Ramirez's expression hardened. "Oh, people suspected. 2 years ago, a junior prosecutor in the DA's office started asking questions about Judge Willis's sudden wealth. She was found dead in her apartment 3 weeks later. Apparent suicide. Case closed." George felt a chill despite the warm evening. And now Eva Parker has stumbled onto the same thing. Eva Parker did more than stumble. She documented it. Those photos she took aren't just smoking guns. They're nuclear bombs, names, dates, amounts, properties, all meticulously organized in Judge Willis's own handwriting. Ramirez set down his coffee mug with careful precision. If this evidence comes to light in the right way, it brings down half the power structure in Austin. "If it comes to light in the right way," George repeated. "What does that mean exactly?" Ramirez met his gaze directly. "It means we have a problem. I've taken this evidence to 3 different federal agencies. Each time the response was the same. Initial interest, followed by sudden silence. Someone's blocking this at every turn." "How is that possible?" "Money and fear," Ramirez said simply. "These people have purchased influence at every level, and what they couldn't buy, they've intimidated. The last agency contact I spoke with told me, off the record, to drop it before I ended up like that prosecutor." He leaned forward. "Mr. Strait, I've been a detective for 17 years. I've never seen a wall this high or this wide." George absorbed this, the magnitude of what they were facing, settling like a weight on his shoulders. "What about Officer Barrera? Where does she stand in all this?" "Elena's solid, one of the few. She's the one who brought me in because she didn't trust her chain of command. Smart move, as it turns out. The chief of detectives has officially ordered her to cease all involvement with the Parker case, citing jurisdictional concerns. She's been reassigned to traffic duty. The blatant corruption was staggering, even knowing what they knew. So what now? We just give up, let Kane and his powerful friends win." Ramirez's eyes gleamed with a stubborn light. "That's not why I drove all the way out here, Mr. Strait. I came because we need a new strategy. These people are used to operating in the shadows. They've built their entire enterprise on the assumption that no one is watching, that people like Eva Parker are invisible and powerless. Understanding dawned. And you think I can change that equation? I know you can. You're George Strait. When you talk, people listen. Not just fans, but governors, senators, media executives. Ramirez leaned forward intently. We need to move this out of the shadows and into the spotlight, where they can't bury it or make it disappear. George considered this. Throughout his career, he'd been careful to keep his private life private, to separate the performer from the person. He'd never used his fame for political causes or public crusades, but this wasn't politics. This was a little boy who would likely be dead if he hadn't recognized George's face that day in the parking lot. This was a mother who had tried to do the right thing and been brutally punished for it. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he asked. "Finally, a press conference, you using your platform to bring attention to this case. Not the specifics of the evidence, that would be too dangerous at this stage, but enough to let Kane and his partners know that the spotlight is on them, that silencing Eva Parker won't make this go away anymore." Wouldn't that just paint a bigger target on Eva and John, on all of us? Ramirez nodded grimly. It's a calculated risk, but right now their plan is simple. Discredit Eva as a thief, get control of John, and make sure neither of them lives long enough to testify. If we go public, it complicates that plan exponentially. Killing or discrediting George Strait is a lot harder than dealing with an invisible cleaning lady and her son. The detective's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. Speaking of complications, Judge Willis just signed a new order. He's demanding a formal hearing on John's guardianship tomorrow morning, citing grave concerns about the child's placement with no blood relation. George felt a surge of anger. That's the same judge implicated in the money laundering. Exactly. He's making his move. Ramirez pocketed his phone. This is how they operate, Mr. Strait. They use their positions, their authority, their respectability as weapons. Tomorrow, Willis will sit on that bench in his black robe, the very picture of judicial propriety, and he'll order John placed in state custody for his own protection. Can he do that? Overturn another judge's guardianship order? Technically, yes. He's senior to Judge Martinez, who granted your emergency guardianship, and with the chief of police in his pocket and Kane's theft allegations against Eva giving him cover, he's got all the pretext he needs. Ramirez's voice hardened. Once John is in the system, he'll vanish, maybe an accident at a foster home, maybe just disappeared into the bureaucracy until Eva is dealt with. George stood abruptly, pacing the length of his study. The familiar space, lined with gold records and family photographs, had always been his sanctuary. Now it felt like a war room. "I won't let that happen." "Neither will I," Ramirez assured him. "But we need to move fast. If we're going public, it needs to be tonight before that hearing." George checked his watch. Nearly 7 in the evening. "How fast can you arrange a press conference?" Ramirez smiled for the first time since his arrival. "For George Strait? I'm pretty sure every news outlet in Texas would clear their evening schedule." His expression turned serious again. "But once we do this, there's no going back. You understand that, right? These people won't just disappear. They'll come after you, your reputation, maybe even your family." Before George could respond, a soft knock at the study door drew their attention. Norma entered, her calm exterior belied by the tension around her eyes. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but John's asking for you, George. He's getting anxious again." Behind her, George could see the small figure of John in the hallway, his thin shoulders hunched with familiar tension. The boy had sensed something, the arrival of the detective, the serious conversation behind closed doors, and his survival instincts had kicked in. "We'll be right there," George assured her. then turned back to Ramirez. "Give me a minute with him." In the hallway, George crouched down to John's level, just as he had done in that parking lot that now seemed a lifetime ago. "Hey, buddy, you doing okay?" John's eyes darted to the detective visible through the open door, then back to George. "Is he here about my mom? Is she okay?" "Your mom is doing just fine," George assured him. "The detective just came to talk. About some grown-up stuff, nothing for you to worry about." John didn't look convinced. "Are they going to make me leave, go with strangers?" The direct question, asked with such resigned fear, twisted something in George's chest. This child had clearly heard too many adult conversations about his fate, had been told too many times that everything would be okay when it wasn't. George made a decision then, one that came from someplace deeper than rational thought. "No, John. No one is going to make you leave. Not tomorrow, not ever, unless it's to go back to your mom when she's all better." He held the boy's gaze steadily. "I promise you that. Do you know what a promise is?" John nodded solemnly. "It's when you say something and really, really mean it." "That's right. And I really, really mean this. You're safe here." Something in the boy's posture eased slightly, a small release of the constant vigilance he'd been maintaining. He glanced again at Ramirez, then leaned forward to whisper in George's ear, just as he had that first day. "Are you going to help catch the bad man?" George nodded, equally solemn. "Yes, John. That's exactly what we're going to do." Rising to his full height, George turned back to the study where Ramirez waited. His decision was made. "Call your contacts," he told the detective. "Set up the press conference for 9 o'clock tonight. We're going to shine a light so bright that even cockroaches like Judge Willis won't find a shadow to hide in." As Ramirez began making calls, George felt Norma's hand slip into his. "You're sure about this?" she asked quietly. He looked down at John, who was watching the adults with the hypervigilance of a child who had learned the hard way that his life could change in an instant based on conversations he wasn't allowed to be part of. "I've never been more sure of anything," George replied. "Some fights you can't walk away from, Norm, not and still look at yourself in the mirror afterward." What George Strait couldn't know, as he prepared to leverage his lifetime of carefully cultivated public goodwill against a criminal enterprise that had claimed lives and corrupted justice, was that Mitchell Kane was already 3 steps ahead of him, implementing a contingency plan that would test the country star's resolve in ways he couldn't imagine. Cameras flashed like summer lightning as George Strait approached the podium, set up hastily in the conference room of Austin's Four Seasons Hotel. Despite the short notice, the space was packed wall to wall with reporters, cameras, and recording devices. The murmur of speculation that had filled the room fell to immediate silence as the king of country music adjusted the microphone, his expression grave beneath the brim of his white Stetson. Detective Ramirez stood unobtrusively to one side, while George's longtime manager and publicist flanked him, both looking distinctly uncomfortable with this unprecedented move. In his nearly 40-year career, George Strait had never called a press conference for anything remotely political or controversial. His rare media appearances were typically limited to music announcements or charity events. This sudden, urgent summons had sent the Texas media into a feeding frenzy of speculation. George surveyed the room, recognizing faces from entertainment outlets mixed with hard news reporters drawn by the mystery. He took a deep breath, centering himself as he would before walking onto a stadium stage. "Thank you all for coming on. Such short notice," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was about to do. "I've never been one for making speeches or taking public stands. Those of you who've covered my career know I prefer to let my music do the talking. But sometimes life puts you in a position where silence isn't an option anymore." He paused, making eye contact with several reporters. 3 days ago, in a shopping center parking lot here in Austin, a 5-year-old boy approached me. He was terrified, desperate for help. What he told me led to the discovery of his mother, beaten nearly to death in a back room of a laundromat. What he didn't know, what none of us knew then, was that his mother had uncovered evidence of a criminal conspiracy involving money laundering, corruption, and abuse of power at the highest levels of Austin's legal and business community. A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the room. Cameras clicked rapidly. This conspiracy is being facilitated by a man named Mitchell Kane, owner of Superior Cleaning Services, who uses his legitimate business to access the homes of judges, politicians, and business leaders involved in laundering millions of dollars of cartel money through Austin real estate and businesses. George's voice remained measured, but there was steel beneath the calm. When Eva Parker, a single mother working as a cleaner for Kane, accidentally discovered evidence of this operation, she attempted to report it to proper authorities. For her courage, she was threatened, hunted, and ultimately attacked so brutally. She remains hospitalized. George leaned slightly forward, his hands gripping the sides of the podium. Now, those same powerful interests are attempting to use their positions to separate her from her son, to discredit her as a thief, and to bury both the evidence and the witnesses. Tomorrow morning, Judge Raymond Willis, one of the central figures implicated in the evidence Eva Parker discovered, plans to hold a hearing to overturn another judge's ruling that granted me temporary guardianship of John Parker while his mother recovers. The room had gone completely still, the reporters transfixed by the unfolding story. It had all the elements of a blockbuster: corruption, violence, a desperate mother and child, and now the unlikely intervention of one of music's biggest stars. I'm not here tonight to try this case in the media. I'm here because John Parker recognized my face in that parking lot and believed I could help him when no one else would. I'm here because his mother, Eva Parker, showed exceptional courage in documenting criminal activity by powerful people, knowing the risk to herself and her son. And I'm here because I believe that when ordinary citizens like Eva Parker try to do the right thing, those of us with platforms and privilege have a responsibility to stand beside them. George pulled a folder from inside his jacket. I have here copies of a legal filing my attorneys submitted 20 minutes ago to the Texas Attorney General, the FBI, and 3 major newspapers. It details the evidence discovered by Eva Parker, authenticated by law enforcement professionals, and now being actively suppressed by corrupt officials within the Austin Police Department and judiciary. Gasps and furious note-taking rippled through the audience. This was no longer just a human interest story. It was breaking news of a criminal conspiracy reaching into the highest echelons of local power. I'm making these files public not just to protect Eva and John Parker, but because the people of Austin deserve to know when their trust has been betrayed by those sworn to uphold the law. George's voice took on an edge that few had ever heard from the normally mild-mannered star. Judge Willis, Chief Detective Morgan, and Mitchell Kane, I want you to know that the shadows you've been operating in are gone. The world is watching. Now, as if on cue, the door at the back of the conference room burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Mitchell Kane had arrived, his face a mask of controlled fury beneath a veneer of professional concern. This is outrageous, Kane announced loudly, moving toward the podium. Mr. Strait is making dangerous, unfounded allegations that threaten to undermine legitimate law enforcement operations. George didn't flinch or retreat. Instead, he looked directly at Kane, their eyes meeting across the now silent room. Mr. Kane, I was wondering when you'd show up. Kane gestured to the officers beside him. These officers have a warrant for Your arrest, Mr. Strait, on charges of interfering with a police investigation and obstruction of justice. I suggest you come quietly and avoid making more of a spectacle of yourself." Murmurs of shock rippled through the press corps. The officers looked distinctly uncomfortable, clearly unhappy about their role in this drama. George's response was to smile slightly. Before these officers take any action, they might want to know that this entire press conference is being streamed live to over 2 million viewers across multiple platforms. My team made sure of that. He gestured to the back of the room, where a young woman held up a tablet showing the skyrocketing viewer count. They might also want to know that 3 federal agents from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit are in this room right now, having arrived about 10 minutes before you did. On cue, 3 men and women in dark suits stood up from different positions. In the audience, badges displayed. The lead agent, a stern-faced woman with close-cropped grey hair, approached the front of the room. "Mitchell Kane, I'm Special Agent Denise Harper, FBI. Those officers with you should stand down immediately. We have federal warrants for your arrest on charges of money laundering, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder." For a fraction of a second, Kane's composure cracked, raw fury and fear showing through before he regained control. "This is a mistake. I have powerful friends." "Yes, we know about your friends," Agent Harper cut in coldly. "Judge Willis was taken into custody at his home 15 minutes ago. Chief Detective Morgan is currently being questioned at the federal building. Your powerful friends are falling like dominoes, Mr. Kane." The 2 Austin police officers who had accompanied Kane exchanged glances, then stepped away from him, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. Kane's eyes darted around the room, calculating. In a sudden movement, he reached inside his jacket. Before he could withdraw whatever he was reaching for, Detective Ramirez appeared behind him, pressing a service weapon against Kane's back. "Don't," Ramirez said quietly. "It's over." As federal agents moved in to handcuff Kane, George turned back to the stunned reporters. "I apologize for the interruption. As you can see, the corruption we're dealing with runs deep enough that Mr. Kane believed he could arrest a private citizen on fabricated charges in front of the national media." He looked directly into the main camera. "That's how confident these people have become in their power, so confident they thought they were untouchable." Agent Harper approached the podium, professionally taking control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Harper with the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force. What Mr. Strait has described is the subject of an ongoing federal investigation. We've been building a case against this network for some time, but Ms. Parker's evidence provided the final pieces we needed. I'll be making a formal statement later this evening. But for now, I want to thank Mr. Strait for his courage in coming forward." As the press conference devolved into a chaotic flurry of questions directed at Agent Harper, George slipped away through a side door where his security team waited. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Norma. "George, are you okay? We're watching everything on the live stream." "I'm fine, Norm. How's John?" "Asleep, thank goodness. He was so worked up earlier that I got him to lie down, and he finally dozed off." Her voice softened. "You did good, cowboy. Real good." "It's not over yet," George cautioned, though relief was beginning to seep through his professional composure. "But at least the right people are involved now. Detective Ramirez just texted. He says to tell you that special protection units have been dispatched to Eva's hospital in San Marcos. She's safe." George felt another weight lift from his shoulders. "Good. I'll be home as soon as I can." "Drive safe," Norma said, then added, "George, I'm proud of you." "Aye." The simple words from the woman who had stood beside him through fame and tragedy, joy and sorrow, meant more than all the gold records on his wall. "Love you, Norm. See you soon." 3 weeks later, George Strait stood on the front porch of his ranch house, watching a very different scene unfold than the one that had greeted him in the aftermath of the press conference. The media storm had eventually subsided. The federal investigation had proceeded methodically through the corrupt network that Kane had built, and a sense of normal life had gradually returned. In the paddock before him, John Parker laughed as he fed an apple to Daisy, the gentle quarter horse that had become his special friend. The change in the boy was remarkable. His shoulders no longer hunched in constant vigilance, his eyes clear and bright instead of shadowed with fear. He had begun to act like a child again, curious and playful, able to focus on the present moment rather than constantly scanning for threats. Beside George, seated in a comfortable chair with a light blanket across her legs despite the warm day, Eva Parker watched her son with tears shimmering in her eyes. Her physical recovery had been steady, if slow. The worst of her injuries had healed, though she still tired easily and walked with a slight limp that doctors weren't sure would ever fully disappear. The psychological healing would take longer, but seeing her son safe and happy was the best medicine possible. "I still don't know how to thank you," she said quietly, not taking her eyes off John. "What you did for us was nothing more than anyone would do," George finished, the familiar exchange having become something of a gentle joke between them. Eva smiled, shaking her head. "Most people would have called the police and walked away, but you took in my son, protected us both, put yourself in the crosshairs of some very dangerous people, and got to be part of bringing down one of the biggest corruption scandals in Texas history," George added, with a hint of his dry humor. "Not bad for an old country singer." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching John as Jennings showed him how to brush Daisy's mane properly. The federal case against Kane, Willis, and their network was proceeding steadily, with Eva's evidence forming the cornerstone of the prosecution. She would eventually need to testify, but for now, the focus was on her recovery and John's well-being. "Have you thought any more about what's next?" George asked gently. "You know you're welcome to stay here as long as you need to." Eva nodded. "You and Norma have been—" She paused, searching for adequate words. "There aren't words for what you've been to us, but John and I need to start rebuilding our own life eventually." "No rush," George assured her. "Besides, I think Daisy would miss her new friend." Eva's expression grew more serious. The FBI agents mentioned a witness protection program, new identities, relocation, the works. She looked down at her hands. "Part of me wants that fresh start, somewhere, far from Austin and all these memories, but another part rebels against the idea of running, of letting them change who we are." George considered this. "Whatever you decide, you won't be facing it alone. Norma and we've come to care about you and John a lot these past weeks." Tears welled in Eva's eyes again. "The night John ran to find help, I was so sure we'd reach the end, that everything I'd tried to do to protect him had failed." She looked up at George. "I never imagined he'd find not just help, but a whole new family." The word family hung in the air between them, unexpectedly right. George thought about the way John had integrated into their daily lives, the way Norma hummed as she packed his lunch for the day, the way George himself looked forward to their evening ritual of reading stories before bedtime. He and Norma had raised a son and lost a daughter. They knew the joy and heartbreak of parenthood. Having John and Eva in their home had awakened something they'd thought long past, the pleasure of nurturing, of watching a child discover the world. "Whatever you decide about the future," George said carefully, "I hope we'll remain part of your lives." Eva reached over and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "After everything we've been through together? I'd say you're stuck with us, Mr. Strait, whether you like it or not." From the paddock, John's voice called out excitedly, "Mom! Mr. George! Look! I'm brushing her all by myself!" They both waved and called out encouragement, sharing a smile as John beamed with pride. In that moment, watching the sunlight catch in the boy's sandy hair, George Strait felt a sense of completion, unlike anything his legendary career had ever provided. The king of country music, with all his platinum albums and sold-out tours, had discovered that his greatest performance had nothing to do with music and everything to do with the courage to stand up when it mattered most. What had begun with a terrified whisper in a parking lot had transformed into something neither George nor Eva could have imagined. A bond forged in crisis, strengthened through protection, and now blossoming into a connection that felt unbreakable. The road ahead would not be simple. There would be trials and testimony, difficult decisions and adjustments. But watching John's carefree interaction with the horse, seeing the peace gradually returning to Eva's eyes, George knew with certainty that some songs were worth singing no matter the cost. The whisper that had paralyzed the king of country that day had changed everything. But as George Strait had discovered throughout his remarkable life, sometimes the most unexpected changes led to the most beautiful destinations.